to the regular board meeting of Tuesday, November the 20th, 2018. We will ask Stephanie to lead us in our opening prayer, national anthem, and oath of citizenship.
God of faithfulness, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God of faithfulness, we come to you troubled by the threat of violence. What change are we able to effect by our prayer before you? By our words? By our deeds? What can we do to bring peace to our world? God, we are in need of your grace to unsettle and redirect our hearts. We are in need of your hope to rekindle and sustain our passion for justice. We are in need of your wisdom that we might recognize a new presence dwelling within us, calling us to live as children of light and of hope rather than of darkness and fear. Be with us in our prayer this day. Help us to truly believe, not only in your abiding presence within and among us, but in the power of our prayer to move mountains. All this we ask in the name of Jesus, our brother, who shares our lives and yours in the unity of the Spirit. Amen. Yes.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Nicely done. Thank you. I would like to ask Vice Chair Marai to read any motions or information that we have received in camera, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were no motions adopted in camera. The following information wasn't received in camera. Gabriella O'Reilly, retiring effective December 31st, 2018. Carol Rahorsky, appointed as acting elementary vice principal at St. Andrew's Catholic Elementary School, effective November 26th, 2018, with an end date to be determined. And Corinne McDonald will resign effective December 7th, 2018.
Thank you very much. Trustees, we are now on number 2, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions to the agenda? None? All right. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Quinn, seconded by Trustee Rowe. All in favour? Thank you. Declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest? None? Thank you. There are no presentations. We have one delegation under 5.1, Gifted Student Survey Results. Ms. Lorenko, please come whenever you're ready.
I'm just going to mention before I start, because my submitted delegation was longer, I'm going to, if it's longer than 10 minutes, I'm going to skip over the opening paragraph. I'm just going to get right to it in case you're following the script. Okay. In discussions and decisions regarding secondary gifted programming over the last year, much weight has been placed on a survey of gifted high school students. Staff concluded that the majority are not interested in a gifted program and that staff are providing appropriate programming and supports to these students. Tonight I will demonstrate that the survey was not only poorly structured and biased, but that no reasonable, objective person could have reached those conclusions. Conclusions which have influenced the decision-making process and jeopardized the future of at-risk students. Unlike other board surveys, the actual detailed results were never shared in a board report. Despite being a survey of gifted students, it was not shared with SEAC, nor with myself, the gifted student representative.
Excuse me, Ms. Lorenko, could you tell me where you've jumped to, please? Could you tell me exactly where you are?
I'm on the 4th paragraph. I had to make some revisions to shorten it, but...
Yes, I'm just trying to follow.
Yeah.
I need to know where you are as you jump. So I don't expect you to break up your presentation. If you could just tell me where you are right now.
I'm on the 4th paragraph.
The 4th paragraph.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Okay, go ahead, please.
I did have to make some adjustments, so... It only came into my possession after being inexplicably shared with an external parent. One has to wonder, why so secretive? The answer is the detailed results do not support the high-level staff interpretations. The respondents to this survey were restricted to gifted secondary students currently enrolled in Halton Catholic. It excluded students who left before grade 9 because they really wanted or needed gifted specific programming, which Halton Catholic does not offer in secondary. Asking the remaining students about their interest in such courses results in a self-fulfilling response. The survey was developed in response to requests to provide gifted students with equitable access to accelerated, enriched programs such as AP or IB and or clustered programming, which occurs naturally within those programs, not gifted specific programming. Nonetheless, all gifted students, including those currently in AP or IB, were asked about their interest in classes for exclusively gifted students and not asked about any program in which they were not currently enrolled. Students in academic were not asked about their potential interest in AP or IB. How can one possibly draw a conclusion about interest in a program that students had no exposure to and were never asked about? Students were asked about their interest in a clustered gifted program, but that term was never defined. Clustering is an educational process which places gifted and or high ability and or high achieving students in an otherwise heterogeneous class. It is not a class of exclusively gifted students. The staff report states that the survey asked students about their interest in being in clustered classes with like-minded and high-achieving peers. This is false. The words like-minded and high-achieving peers are not found anywhere in the survey. Students' understanding of a clustered gifted programming is anybody's guess. However, responses speak to students' lack of interest in switching out of their current program and into a program for and or with exclusively gifted students. And still, some did indicate that they would actually be interested in such a program under different circumstances. Here's what students had to say. I do not want to switch schools or leave my friends at Loyola. I would enroll in a program specifically for gifted students. However, I do not want to leave Holy Trinity. I've already made connections with friends and teachers in this school, and am an integral part to some school activities. I feel like it would be unfair to transfer schools at this point. However, if there had been the option before I entered high school, I may have chosen to go to a different school. It's too late now. I've already made friends and established foundations at STA. I do not want to uproot my high school life and move to a new school. The idea of a program is good regardless. I really like the idea, but it isn't something I would change schools for now. If the program was available prior to my entry to high school, things would be different. I would only enroll if it was offered in grade 9, but I would not change my school after already going to BR. The survey does not allow for a conclusion to be drawn about the interests of incoming grade 9 students or of students currently in an alternative program not exclusively for gifted students, including a truly clustered program, AP or IB. The results do, however, tell us how well the programs are meeting the needs of those students, but it's not what you've been led to believe. Conclusions were based on the quantitative results of selected multiple choice answers to extremely subjective questions. What does satisfied mean? How does one define happiness? The real meat is in the 29 pages of student comments, none of which have been publicly shared before. Staff told us that they valued student voice. They told us that, quote, from the perspective of support and programming for gifted students, HCDSB staff are able to meet and are meeting needs in any chosen program or pathway. Here's what your students had to say. There is nothing that I like about my current program setup. No added benefit in being recognized as gifted. I've never even met my cert until grade 11. Most of my teachers had no idea that I was gifted. The whole program has been a waste of time filling out forms that don't translate into any challenged or advanced learning throughout high school. I was never challenged by teachers. They had no idea that I was gifted. In addition to the few teachers that I had talked to about my IEP, the only advanced learning I was offered was more work. Our IEPs that we spend time filling out, I feel, are not being looked at or considered for the benefit of our education. I dislike the setup of the program here. One teacher has to try to meet many students' needs when she isn't able to see us every day in our learning environment. She's not able to help change our program or shift the teaching style to fit the needs of the students who need help. I have heard this expressed by my previous gifted classmates. Their needs are not being met either. Student comments about their experience in the different pathways are also very telling. Here's what academic students like most about their programs. I like how the classes are easy to follow and it's not difficult to earn high marks, though I do feel as though I should be challenged more in school. It is simple and easy to achieve high marks. What they like least. I miss the way the classes ran and the enrichment in the gifted class, as well as not receiving many challenges. It took 3 years to be learning things I'm interested in. It's very easy. The lack of an AP or IB program tends to make programs less challenging and therefore less interesting. There is no academic enhanced program such as AP that would challenge me and allow me to feel more satisfied. Staff indicate that parents were not surveyed because parents always want more. Wouldn't you want more for your child, gifted or not, than for them to be getting easy marks without trying, to not be challenged in high school, so that they can get into a competitive university program for which they will be woefully unprepared? Yes, parents definitely want more than that. By contrast, what IB students like most about their program includes comments such as, I like how many of the students in IB are like-minded and have similar academic goals. It builds a community of dedicated and perseverant students. Additionally, the IB teachers are equally dedicated and engage the students. Overall, the program is very challenging and I've made so many amazing and intelligent friends. What AP students like most includes, I like AP because it moves at a faster pace than the academic stream, and I can connect with people who are passionate about the subject like I am. However, I also like that I can take some courses in AP and some in academic to lighten my workload so that I can participate in extracurricular activities as well. The survey clearly demonstrates that many gifted students in a regular academic stream, unlike their peers in AP or IB, are coasting through high school. How can these kids possibly reach their potential if they are not challenged? The board is failing these students whether they're satisfied or not. My kids would be very satisfied with pepperoni pizza for dinner every night. That doesn't mean I stop feeding them a balanced, nutritious diet because I know they need it to be healthy. This board has a legal obligation to meet the needs of every student and to provide an individual education plan and special education programs and services for those identified with an exceptionality. Halton Catholic is failing in its obligations. At the last board meeting, you heard that the board is not required to offer a full range of special education placements. That is correct. However, boards are required to purchase special education programs or services from other boards if they're not able to provide the appropriate programming themselves. This board was ordered to do just that in a tribunal decision after repeatedly failing to comply with the Education Act and previous tribunal orders with respect to a gifted student who by that time was entering grade 12. Is that how this board prefers to operate? You also heard that the special education plan meets ministry approval. Just because there's a plan in place does not mean it is working. At the September SEAC meeting, I asked when was the last time that the ministry had conducted an IEP audit. Staff could not recall such an audit in recent memory. The only way to truly know if these students' needs are being met is to audit the gifted IEPs and interview parents as to their experience and the effectiveness of their child's programming. I'm therefore requesting that trustees ask for a ministry audit of gifted IEPs an open-ended survey of all parents of gifted students in all grades and placements to be shared with SEAC and trustees, and a commitment from staff to rectify deficiencies, the effectiveness of which is to be determined through a follow-up survey of parents of gifted students.
Thank you. Any questions from the trustees on this matter? Trustee Ian Tomasi, then Trustee Carabella.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Maria, for coming again. I guess my question is now is have you run this past SEAC? Because SEAC would be, being that you're on SEAC, it would be the natural place to run it through first before you come to the board and have a committee opinion in response to that.
Well, I know you've asked that question a few times, so with respect to this particular survey, I would ask why it was never presented to SEAC. It was never shared with SEAC. So initially, when the discussions of secondary gifted programming came up, those conversations happened via email directly with the current superintendent at the time. And he agreed to conduct a review of gifted programming in secondary schools. He could have put that on the SEAC agenda. He didn't. I did ask to be involved in that I wanted to work collaboratively with him on that initiative. I wasn't included in that initiative. And what happened, it was reported, a high-level report to SEAC. It wasn't on the agenda. I wasn't at the meeting. So I have to ask, why I wasn't more involved as the SEAC rep, why I was left out of it until the end. And also, this item was a business arising item at this board, and so this is where it's at this point. So to take it back to SEAC at this point doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Perhaps we could get some input. Wendy?
So, Maria, it was presented to SEAC fully in March, a meeting you weren't able to attend, and let us know at 5:15 that you wouldn't be attending that evening, but we did have a fulsome discussion of the survey at that time. In addition, it is by law, according to the Education Act, that it is SEAC has a legal obligation actually to weigh in on programs and services as it relates to special education. So that would actually be the best place to start.
So if I
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Hold on just a minute,
Point of
please.
order, Madam Chair.
Just
Can
a
you
minute.
identify the previous speaker, please?
Yes, Wendy Reed Purcell. Wendy, what's your title? I'm sorry.
I'm the coordinator of special education for the board.
Point of
Cipriano
order, Madam Chair.
is unable to be. I'm speaking right now. Superintendent Cipriano is unable to be here, so Wendy is speaking for that department. You had something to say?
I did.
Go ahead.
So can
Okay,
I
yes,
just
please.
quickly respond to what
Mhm.
Wendy shared there? Yes, I did advise that I was not attending that meeting. However, this wasn't on the agenda. The gifted SEAC survey, or the gifted survey report wasn't on the agenda. It was buried in the superintendent's report, so I have no way of knowing that it was going to be talked about. And what was presented from what I can find in the minutes is a high-level interpretation. The full 43-page report was never shared with SEAC, was my point. And also, I agree with you that SEAC is the appropriate place to talk about policies. I had hoped to have some of these discussions during the special education plan review. The previous superintendent made it very clear that that was a review of the special education plan document and not a time to discuss programs and placements. And I actually clarified that with him before the process started. As well, policies, as you know, policies typically go to policy committee and then they come to the board for approval. I have noticed that policies that are specific to special education, such as the policy on range of placements, never comes to SEAC. It goes to policy committee, then it comes to the board. I raised that with the previous superintendent and suggested that would be a good process to start following, is that those policies that are specific to special education come to SEAC, and that has not been addressed.
Thank you. Trustee Quinn?
I'll use my point of order now, Madam. I believe we're only supposed to be asking questions for clarification from the chair, and we're not supposed to be having questions from the back rows or from trustees unless they're for clarification.
Yes, you're quite right. We asked for questions for clarification, and we were getting clarification from Wendy regarding the concern that Ms. Lorenko had. Okay? So, Trustee Carabella.
I have a question about your request. So what do you mean by open-ended survey? What does that mean?
So I think what I said was open-ended, so I did say open-ended survey, sorry. I meant like open-ended questions. So for example, as I said earlier, I think a question of how satisfied are you is difficult to really gauge. People have different interpretations of what satisfaction means. So I mean more like open-ended questions such as, you know, do you find the programming for your child is effective, and an opportunity to kind of elaborate on that, because I think that's where you really get better information. So that's what I meant by open-ended.
Thank you. We have, hold on, Trustee Danko, you have a question, and William, you have a question. Is that right? Okay. I'm going to get my list here. And Trustee Intomasi, you have a question? Anyone else? Trustee Carabella? Okay. Just get this down. All right, Trustee Danko, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All I was going to point out was that the SEAC is a non-binding advisory committee to the board. So, I mean, it's a great place to discuss these issues, but eventually they just pass them along to us, which is what it's supposed to do. They're not supposed to die there or disappear there. It's not supposed to be a black hole where discussion goes and doesn't move forward. So the best place for it to come is to this board.
There are 4 trustees that sit on SEAC, and so certain things do come along. It just depends what it is.
If I could just add to that as well. I have in the past tried to put items on the agenda, and I still have the email that I'm happy to share with everyone where the previous chair told me that SEAC does not have policy-making authority, that rests with the board. And also another point, too, when I was going back and forth with the previous superintendent via email, he said that the transportation decision, which isn't the subject of my delegation, but just as an example, that was not within the purview of special education, but that the trustees did have the authority to approve something like that. And I did share that back in April when Trustee Antomasi asked me the same question. So he said, you know, I can't make that decision, the trustees can, so here I am.
Vice Chair Meyer, did you want to? No, you're okay? You're good. Okay. Trustee William.
You mentioned the open-ended survey. Is this a survey directed towards parents or towards the students?
So the survey that's the subject of my delegation was a survey that was conducted with students. The survey that I'm requesting is a survey of parents because parents were left out of that process entirely, and so I'm asking that open-ended questions be asked of parents to give them an opportunity to really share their thoughts.
Thank you. Trustee Intomasi.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I'm just thinking, you've got open-ended survey, and it's quite evident from your delegation here that you're not satisfied that the way the words were crafted in this survey were any good. So I'm wondering who you would perceive to craft the questions. I don't know that you realize that the questions that were crafted in that survey that you don't like did not come from the previous superintendent. We have a department that crafts the questions. So your allegation, I don't know where you come up with the fact that you think it's slanted or it's this or it's that, but this is crafted by professionals who have been educated to do these sorts of things. So I'm just wondering, if you're saying you want an open-ended survey now, who do you see as being capable of crafting the questions, because you seem to not think that the people here at the board are able to do so?
Well, just as an example, and I do mention this, so the question asked students about their interest in a clustered gifted programming, but it never defined that. Clustered gifted programming is a very specific educational term. So as an example of why I didn't think the questions were well worded, I don't know that students between the ages of 14 to 18 understand what a clustered gifted program is. And as one example, one of the students replied and said, I was in a clustered gifted program at Canadian Martyrs. We don't offer a clustered gifted program at Canadian Martyrs. So that's an example of where I think the question wasn't well worded. And there's others. I don't have them all at my fingertips, and I'm sure we don't want to go through them. But a suggestion that I would have is to have SEAC weigh in on the questions. But at the end of the day, if the questions are open-ended, that gives people to share whatever feedback they feel is worth sharing, and that's where I think the value is.
Thank you. We have Trustee Carabella, and then I think we'll probably move on after that. You had a question?
Thank you. So, you talk about the survey to parents of gifted students, and I'm wondering if that's kind of limiting, that maybe all parents involved in special whose children are in special education, would that be maybe something the board could find useful?
I absolutely would find that useful. I actually think I had suggested that at one point at SEAC as well. Yeah, I do think a survey of all parents with spec ed students would be great.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lorenko, for your presentation, and thank you, trustees, for the clarification. As you know, Maria will come back to you with the action items, and thank you very much for all your work on that. Trustees, we're going to 6.1, minutes of the November 6th regular board meeting. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Atright, seconded by Trustee Rowe. Any questions to those minutes? All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Business arising from previous meetings, 7.1, summary of outstanding items. And so we have the transportation issue for the gifted students in the board and the student trustees, so that's all happening the fall of 18, which is where we are now. So we're going to action items, no questions. We'll go to action items, response to the delegation, which is Ms. Lorenko's delegation. So, in accordance with policy I-06, delegation to the board, trustees may move a motion to 1. Make a decision on the presentation at the same meeting. 2. Refer the matter to a future meeting. 3. Request a staff report on the matter to be considered at a future meeting. Or 4. Receive as information. This evening we have had a delegation regarding gifted student survey results. I open up the floor for any trustee motions regarding the delegation. Oh my goodness, isn't this nice? Okay, so we will take Trustee Quinn first of all, and then Trustee Carabella, and I believe we also have Trustee Intermassey. Okay, so Trustee Quinn.
Thank you very much for recognizing me, Madam Chair, and through you, I would like to move that our board ask staff to conduct a survey of parents in the gifted program as requested by the delegation. Any information that we can receive from our parents should be welcomed by our board, and I think that would help inform our gifted programming going forward.
Thank you. A seconder for that? Trustee Carabella. Anyone wish to speak to that? You realize, of course, that we expire at the end of November.
My vote is worth something today still.
Okay. Trustee Carabella?
Well, I wanted to add to that or make an amendment to include that it involves all spec ed parents, not just the gifted.
Could you read the amended motion then, please?
I wouldn't accept that change to the motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are they in sync, those two? Could you read yours again, please?
The delegation was regarding
yes, I know.
gifted.
It was.
My motion is to ask senior staff to follow through on the delegate's request to survey gifted parents.
Okay, so it doesn't match. Okay. Okay. Trustee Intermassey.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Trustee Carabella made an amendment, and there's a way to handle the amendment which you did not follow. Are you withdrawing the amendment? Because it doesn't. No one seconded it. Well, that's what you should have asked. You didn't ask anyone to second it.
But it didn't match. It didn't match in. It was Trustee Quinn's was simply on gifted.
Right.
And Trustee Carabella was to extend it to all special ed, and the delegation is on gifted.
Well, you should have called a vote on that.
All right, we'll have a vote on that. Keep you happy, Anthony.
Frankly, sorry, Madam Chair, I think we have to get a seconder for my motion, and then it can be amended after.
Did we not have a seconder for your motion?
We did.
Trustee Carabella
Okay.
seconded it. Trustee Carabella did the seconding. Okay? And then she did an amendment. And then you've withdrawn your amendment? You seconded Trustee Quinn's original amendment? Is that correct?
Madam Chair.
Oh, just a minute, Anthony.
The motion was on the table. The member made it a motion to an amendment, and you did not call for a seconder.
She withdrew it. Okay, a seconder for the motion. This is our last meeting. I'd like to get through it peacefully. A seconder. You're going to second that motion.
I'll
Okay,
second that.
fine. So, the amendment. Okay, the amendment. So you've got a seconder for the amendment, which is expanding on that one, which is gifted, to include all special education students. Is that correct? All right, let's take a vote on the amendment. So, do you wish to speak to this further? Are you okay with this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just trying to see how it could be helpful to the board, that not just specific, if we're already going to survey parents. That's all. I just thought that the scope would be more helpful.
I'll be ready for the vote. Trustee Quinn.
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask how many families are in the gifted program versus the other special education programs at our board, so I have an understanding of how many families we'd have to communicate with for this survey.
Wendy, can you give us that?
We have 7 programs across the board. One of them actually is at Canadian Martyrs. We do have a clustered gifted program there, and they each have a maximum of 25 students, so you can do the math. But I'm thinking we're not just surveying gifted parents whose children are in clustered gifted classes, correct?
All identified gifted students, I think, would be the
Right.
goal.
It's 2% of our overall student population.
And what is the number for the broader special education families? How many students in broader special education?
I don't have that data offhand. It's in the report. I don't know.
Okay.
Perhaps Trustee Rowe could inform me if he has it at hand.
Trustee Rowe? Okay. Is this relevant to this particular issue? Yes, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, while Mark's looking for the numbers. It seems to me we're jumping all over the place. I don't see why we're including all of spec ed and all of all identified students.
Yep.
And we have no formula, we have no shape, we have no nothing of how this is supposed to look if it's going out to the board. To just say we're going to formulate a survey and woohoo, here we go. I mean, we have not had any staff input. I mean, at the very least, we should have staff input as to how this thing is going to look. And we have a new board coming in, and I would like to think that they should be able to sit down and digest some of the information before we go and pass a motion that they're going to have to live with when no one has any guidepost as to what this thing is supposed to look like. To me, it's nebulous, and you know, it's not fitting in a box for me.
No, thank you. Do you have that number now, Trustee Rowe?
Yes, it's on page 11 of the report, 241 gifted students.
241. Okay. I'm sorry?
I understood that number. It was the number of students in the other spec ed program. That's why I wanted a survey of 241 families wouldn't be as onerous as surveying the entire spec ed continuum, I believe.
We just did in the department an audit of how many identified and non-identified IEPs in the board this current school year. So we're sitting somewhere, I want to say, between 2,500 and 3,000. Yeah.
All right, so we're back to the amendment. Yes? We got it moved by Trustee Carabella, seconded by Trustee Danko. Does anyone need the amendment read out, or are we ready for the vote? Ready for the vote? Okay, Trustee Carabella?
So, in favor?
Yes.
Sorry, does Trustee Quinn, you still disagree with this?
Yes, I consider it an unfriendly amendment to my motion.
Thank you.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Stephanie?
Opposed.
Trustee Intomasi?
Opposed.
Trustee Michael?
Opposed.
Trustee Trice?
Opposed.
Vice Chair Murray?
Opposed.
Trustee Danko?
In favor?
Trustee Denzil?
Opposed.
Trustee Rowe?
Opposed.
Trustee William?
Opposed.
Trustee Quinn?
Opposed.
Thank you. That fails. Now we're back to the original motion. Trustee Quinn, could you please repeat the original motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I move that our board request senior staff to conduct a survey of the parents currently enrolled or identified as gifted students at our board as to their satisfaction with the programming available to their students.
Thank you. Trustee Carabella, you've initially supported that, seconded that. Are you still seconding that? All right. Any further discussion on that? Vice Chair Murray.
Yeah, a question for Trustee Quinn. As you know, there's another motion on the floor today, and I just wanted clarification. Do you think that this survey precludes the board moving forward with the other motion going forward, or can the two, because obviously that's been on the discussion item for a few months now, or do you feel like we can do both at the same time and get further feedback that could maybe enhance programming going forward?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for your question, Trustee Murray. No, I believe the two would be beneficial. Well, the motion on the table for later on in the meeting, I think, is separate and above our interest in having parent feedback to our board on special education programming for gifted children.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on this? If not, we'll take the vote. All right. Okay, Trustee Quinn?
In favor, thank you.
Trustee William?
Opposed.
Trustee Rowe?
Opposed.
Trustee Denzil?
Opposed.
Trustee Danko?
In favor?
Vice Chair Murray?
In favor.
Trustee Trites?
In favor.
Trustee Michael?
Opposed.
Trustee Intomasi?
Opposed.
Trustee Stephanie?
Opposed.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
5-4? So it passes, right? Okay, so Wendy and our research people, we'll look at that a little bit later. Are we okay there, Pat, with the numbers? Okay. All right, so that has passed. All right, so let's just see, where are we now? With that motion, right, that resolution. Okay. All right. All right, moving on to the next one then. 8.2, transportation, and that is Trustee Carabella, your notice of motion. Would you like to repeat your notice of motion, please, Trustee Carabella?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board will provide transportation to identified gifted students with an individualized education plan, IEP, to an advanced placement, AP program, if one is not available in their catchment area if requested.
Thank you. And did you have a seconder to that? Trustee Danko, would you like to speak to that further?
Thank you. I did want to point out that in my election campaign I said I would advocate for children with special needs. And I've been elected by Catholic ratepayers, and I have a responsibility to the community that elected me. And personally, I have a responsibility to fulfill what I said I would do, to keep my word. I also ran on parents being the primary educators of their children. And it's parents that have brought forward this issue for their children with special needs. And we've been hearing about it and being made aware about this issue since last April. And at this point, decisions need to be made because of program placements and planning for the next year, 2019-2020. And that is why I put forward this motion. The gifted students have been identified as having an exceptionality or special need. They have an IEP, an individual education plan. In elementary school, they have gifted classes to address their identified needs. But what happens at the secondary level for them? We do not have at this time a specialized course for identified gifted students with an IEP. What we do have is advanced placement course, which is a great program for them to attend as well as the IB program. With the AP program, they would register as all students do, and if accepted, I am proposing that we provide the busing transportation for them if they are outside the catchment area for the school that provides AP. This would ensure that we are providing for their identified needs. It would ensure that all gifted students have the opportunity to attend the AP program, if accepted, at HCDSB. As of now, some gifted students have this opportunity if they live in a catchment area of a high school that provides AP. By providing the identified gifted students with busing, it would ensure that at the secondary level, they will have a chance at a challenging, enriched, and engaging program and have a better chance at reaching their potential. We have heard this from the complete survey results. We have heard this from the complete survey results, excuse me, from the delegations and from parents in emails and testimonials. If gifted students leave our schools for a better program elsewhere, they are also leaving a Catholic environment and Catholic faith formation, and this is significant. We have a responsibility to the identified gifted students with an IEP to experience learning to their potential and be in a Catholic faith formation environment, to be in a Catholic high school. I invite you to support this motion on behalf of our Catholic gifted students.
Thank you. Discussion, Trustee Ian Tomasi.
Yes, Madam Chair, I propose an amendment to the motion, and that would be, will provide transportation after transportation pending ministry transportation funding study to be received. I might have to change a word or two in there, but that's the gist of it. So, because we just voted on this at our last meeting, and we agreed that we would wait until we found out about ministry funding to make sure that we've got the funding to do this. I mean, we're hearing in the news every day about our new government and how they're cutting back funds. And we're sitting here considering adding more cost to a budget that we've approved, that we've been through costs on, that we've said, no, there's the guideline. We have all our guidelines, and then every time someone comes in, we say, we'll add more here, and we're going to add more there. So how is this next board going to deal with us throwing more money onto the budget if the government turns around and says, well, guess what, guys, you're going to have to chop some more off? So not only would this end up going out the window because they would have to reverse it, but they would also be looking at everything else that's happening, and they might have to start chopping there as well. So I just don't see how this is a productive exercise at this point in time.
Thank you. A seconder for the amendment, please. A seconder for Trustee Intomasi's amendment. Trustee Michael, thank you. Any further discussion on this issue? We do have a lot of emails and a lot of interest. I'm sorry, Vice Chair Murray, go ahead, please. No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I think I appreciate the comments by Trustee Intomasi. I would say that it completely negates the spirit of the motion, right? Like we did pass a motion back in May to hear feedback from the province that was expected in the fall. The fact is that we have no idea when it is to be expected, but we need to give some feedback to the community. Hence, why this is, I believe, why this has come up again. But by passing that, if you dislike this motion, just defeat the main motion. So the amendment doesn't add anything to it. All we're doing is voting on the same motion twice. But that's my thought on it.
It's saying that we won't do anything until the survey comes in, which we did. We did earlier, but then again, the survey is delayed. Trustee Quinn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, in response to the amendment, the reason that I would be supporting this is because it answers the needs of parents who have come to us very passionately, and I think with a solid case for why their students, why their children need access to these programs and can't get it because of distances from the program spaces. So that's my answer to the member across the table as to why this might make sense.
Anyone else wish to speak to this? Trustee Carabello?
Well, it's just that we don't know when that survey will come back to the board as well, and I think we can make the decision going forward at this time. Parents need to decide for next year. Many things, I think we can deal with them as they come, and we can make decisions now as well.
Once you give it, it's extremely difficult to take it away. So, Superintendent Ngoy and then Trustee Intomasi.
Madam Chair, I'd like to speak to the main motion overall, if I may.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Can we vote on this amendment then and then speak to the main motion?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, Trustee, thank you. I just want to clarify, Trustee Quinsmark, you support the amendment to Helena's main motion?
No, I didn't say that. I was asking that the treasurer wait until after we vote on the amendment to give her point of view on the main motion.
Oh, okay, thank you.
If I could, Madam Chair, I would like to hear from Superintendent Ngoy as to the costs if we do go ahead with this, if we don't wait until we hear something from the ministry, where those funds are going to come from and what kind of funds we're looking at. I mean, we're talking about approving things, and I am fully aware that, you know, we should be supplying programming, et cetera, but the programs are there. And we don't drive anybody to these programs. And 9 times out of 10, I'll bet you if you please put this in the survey, is how many of these parents will drive those children right now, are driving those children to the IB and the AP. Because I know for a fact that majority of parents are driving their kids to school, period, these days. And having said that, I would like to know what this is going to cost, because no one's talking about cost. And we talk about being fiscally responsible. How are we being fiscally responsible if people come in asking for things, justified or not? How are we going to pay for it?
Through you, Madam Chair, I was going to echo Trustee Intomasi's sentiment that I'm interested to know the costs, but I don't think it's relevant to her motion to change this.
Madam Chair, I think you need to handle the amendment the way you've always handled them as you've been chair over the years, and that's in a consistent manner. So I think you should call the vote on this amendment so we can get back to the main motion where we can have a full cost a fulsome discussion of the costs.
I don't support this amendment purely because it confuses the main motion. I think we should defeat this amendment, and then we can discuss the merits of the main motion cleanly.
We may not defeat the amendment. You don't know that.
No, I know, and I'm just suggesting my 2 cents. I think we should.
Opposed.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor. Opposed.
Opposed.
Opposed. In favor.
Opposed.
In favor.
In favor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to address some of the questions that have been raised as well. Trustee Carabella mentioned that we're looking at program planning for next year, and I wanted to just clarify that that is indeed going to happen. between March and June as we embark in 2019-20 budget year. We have a very comprehensive budget cycle, as trustees are aware, where we're looking at these costs. So right now we're talking about adding around $200,000 of costs for a program for gifted students, and you know, you can argue it's inequitable, but you can also argue that currently, if you look on the actual board package under item 7.1, the pending item is for that more input into the transportation to come up before a decision is made. There has been a consensus around this board table as a result of the April 17th meeting, where everyone agreed we're going to be waiting on more information on the transportation funding to know where we're going before we come back and look at the options for transportation for gifted students for these programs. That hasn't come yet. That doesn't mean it's not changing. That still will occur. We also have a revised budget coming up, and it's coming up next month. There's a lot of pieces to that. It's a comprehensive review. If we're going to add $200,000 into the budget, we shouldn't do it between budget cycles. It's not fiscally prudent, and it's also not fiscally prudent as we have a new government in place that is looking at savings provincially, significant savings provincially, and is determined to balance the provincial budget. We're talking about $15 billion. That will have an impact on education funding. And the Board of Trustees sitting around this table and doing the budget cycle next year will have a very challenging task ahead of time. So are we making a decision around the table right now to add optional transportation into the budget for next year? We're 2 budget cycles away from that. Why are we not letting the time and the information to come so that it's disseminated and the best information is made, the best decision is made on the information available? So I think we are tackling this area a bit too soon. I would really recommend trustees allow for more information to come forward, and we do this as part of the 2019-20 budget cycle when we know what we're dealing with, as opposed to setting some expectations for a community that we may not be able to afford, that we may have to put the Board of Trustees around this table that is going to follow, look at it and make the hard decision to then take something away from a community. So I would really like the trustees to consider where we are, the times, and we are in between budget cycles. We have 1 month until 2 more board meetings until we're going to be presenting the revised budget. There's challenges in the revised budget. There is funding that has been announced in the budget cycle back in March that we haven't heard back. We are not necessarily, we don't know if it's going to be given to us or not. We're looking at about $1 million. We're waiting for direction that impacts this current year. We don't even know what the budget for 1920 is. And when we do programming decisions, it isn't now for next year. It is between that budget cycle when we do a lot of consultation and a lot of analysis. I understand Trustee Carabella's motion. I understand what she's trying to achieve, and it is very noble, but I do believe that we need more information before we start making these decisions, and especially in between budget cycles and without the information. It just is the fiscally responsible thing to do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And that whole issue will be left to the new board to do when the budget and everything else comes down in the new year?
That would be my recommendation as treasurer, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so anyone else wish to speak to this? Okay, Trustee Rowe, and then Trustee Danko.
Just a point that I had made last time about the same reasons that Superintendent McCoy gave about the expense of it. But also remember that you're making a decision not for a small group of people in Oakville, you're making it for the entire board, which includes transporting a small number of people, maybe from Georgetown to all the way to Milton, which will probably end up being a taxi, which will increase your costs even more. So I think this needs to be looked at based on staff input and a whole program going forward that's going to best serve the needs of the students and one that the board can afford.
Thank you. Trustee Danko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out a couple things. The board had a budget vote in June where we managed to approve several savings and cost-saving measures in that budget, and we increased our operating reserve at that time by a healthy amount, if I'm not mistaken. Also, you pointed out nostalgia and some fond recollections of the past. One thing I would like to point out is back when we were rolling out full-day kindergarten, this board was very aggressive in adding classes at that time, even faster than the ministry recommended, even faster than our budget could support. In fact, there were no issues with adjusting the budget in mid-cycle to accommodate the addition of additional full-day kindergarten classes that we couldn't sustain, and it was widely reported then that we went into an operating deficit, and our treasurer at the time was very creative in finding ways to fund that, a very aggressive rollout of full-day kindergarten that came more or less on the fly at the time to agree with government policy back then. So I just wanted to point out that little walk down memory lane as how budgets can be changed.
That was to give equity to all of our little ones across the board, if I recall correctly. And the ministry did pay us back. It just took a little while to come. Is that correct? Yes, we got paid back. You're welcome.
If I could, Madam Chair, if I could just piggyback off of that. We knew the money was coming in this circumstance. We do not know whether the money is coming or not.
That's correct, yes. Vice Chair Murray?
Just a few points here that I wrote down. First off, I want to, this has been an ongoing issue since May, and just staff have done a lot of work on this, so thank you for the significant report back in May that went on. But I also want to commend Trustee Carabella on her approach on this, and I think it's important to keep in mind where we've come from and where we are today. So at first, we looked at pretty sweeping changes of this program that would see the board incur costs of over $500,000 in transportation costs. We heard feedback around this table as a collective, certainly from staff, which have a good idea on how this could be implemented and the costs associated with it. And she significantly scaled down the approach. She wanted to allow the public to provide input on an issue that's important to her, but provide a compromise that may be reasonable to the Board of Trustees and certainly to staff. So this item was one of the lowest cost items on the May report, $188,000, and so I appreciate that. It represents under 2.37% of all of our busing costs in the board, and it represents 0.45% of our entire $409 million budget. And if you look in our future part of this agenda, where we have the updated audited financial statements, you'll see that there are lots of areas where this board is going over budget on reasonable things because of class sizes expanding, and that's on instruction and that's on administration. In fact, we're under budget on transportation by $104,000 for this year alone, and yeah, it always changes. So currently, we do not serve the communities. We only serve the communities of River Oaks and Oakville, a bit of South Burlington, North Milton, but South Oakville, west of 13 Mile Creek, all of Halton Hills, South Milton. If you're an IEP student, you don't receive this service. So I think we need to try to be equitable. I think we made very hard decisions in the past, budget by budget, where we have tried to always be extremely fiscally responsible, and we do this and we save so that when the community comes to us and they propose ideas, we're in a solid financial position to do that. And I'm so happy that we've done that over the past 4 years, and it is going to be tougher, but certainly I would agree we should always put money into services versus increasing permanent staff that will have ongoing costs. So I just want to thank Helena for an incremental approach, a reasonable approach that I don't think will bog down future boards, but is reasonable in scope. So thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the transportation allocation, speaking about what we are over budget or under budget. In the 18-19, which is this current year, we are $1.4 million over the allocation for transportation already.
Sure. Madam Chair, if I just may correct something. Sorry. No, it's...
The allocation, the expense is 1.4 million over the allocation for transportation as it is in the current year budget. Next year's budget, we don't even know. We do expect reductions. So we do know we expect reductions. We just don't know the extent. Adding to it, I know we have reserves. We've worked very hard around the stable, and the staff have worked extremely hard to build those reserves. My opinion as treasurer is we're going to need them to balance the budget in the next few years. Making that decision now and saying we have reserves is not fiscally responsible. It also isn't the time to add currently when we have a revised budget coming up and we have a budget cycle. This relates to the budget cycle for 2019-20. Why are we making the decision now with so many uncertainties?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And no, you're certainly correct when you say that we are above allocation. That's not what I was suggesting. In every budget that this board passed, we are always above allocation the last four years. What I was saying is what we budgeted for was we have come under what was budgeted in those interim statements. So of course, every year we're going to be over and above. That has happened for many years. All I'm saying is in this current financial period, we're currently tracking under. But the main point I wanted to get across was in the staff report we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 options that could be over $1 million. And I hear the staff. I hear how expensive these things are. I hear we don't want to create structural deficits for this board, but this is a reasonable, the lowest cost option, reasonable approach that affects only a small number of students to start the process of being more equitable. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to that?
I'm not sure if this will be making it more equitable, Madam Chair. We are looking at all those options because those options have all come into discussion and they are all option and programming that do not have transportation. So if we are going to be speaking about equitable, I think it would be looking at them all.
All right. We've got, thank you very much. We've got Trustee Intomasi and then Trustee Michael.
I'll pass to Trustee Michael.
Through you to, I don't even know who this is going back to, but what do we say to the AP and IB students that aren't gifted? How is this fair to them? This is only AP, it's not IB. Well, AP then. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a comment through you. We've been talking about this board is exiting very shortly, but we did start this back in May. It's been, we've heard from all sides, which is great. I really appreciate the comments here tonight. But I think if we start it, we end it. Everybody has waited long enough for this. Thank you.
Not to belabor it, but Trustee Michael's correct. I mean, this is perhaps the least expensive, but this won't be the end of it. Because if you give it to one, you have to give it to the other, and that's the equity piece. And yes, we did start speaking about this way back when, but we also decided to wait way back when until we found out about ministry funding. I don't know how we keep forgetting about that little part. And yes, we've had some savings, but also what doesn't get discussed at this table is the amount of legals costs that we've incurred this last year because of trustees trying to maneuver one thing or another. So where we've saved in some spots, we've blown the doors off of other things, but somehow that never comes to the forefront.
Thank you. Trustee Quinn?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to one of the senior staff. Can you give me an update on how many AP spaces we plan to have in the board for the 2019-2020 school year?
Superintendent Percassin? Oh, it's okay. It's Tony. Okay. We'll try. The superintendent that would know that is not here right now. Do you want to try it?
I don't have the number of spaces by any chance, but what we do always look at is the opportunity to expand the program, and Holy Trinity has been a recent one, looking at how that, making sure that it's fully sustainable and then moving on to another secondary school. So that will address some of these catchment areas. It does take time to implement the program. We've done our best to improve programming in the schools, and that's on Superintendent Pinelli's radar, and working with, you need the right staffing as well in place at that school to make that happen. So I don't have an answer to how many students, but we are always looking for opportunities to expand the programming.
Also, one thing that came up at our last discussion on this, if you remember, and Superintendent Cipriano's not here, that these are not gifted programs. They're open to everyone. So if you've got two students and one's gifted and one's not, and you're busing the gifted one, what does that say about the other student? Do they have legal recourse with regard to that? Is there any issue around the human rights? Anyone want to talk about that over in the back row there? No? Okay, no, we need the other people. Paul? Sorry, you were first, so go ahead.
I'm only being pushy about it because I want to bring up on the point that you just made. The
Please.
IE program, an independent, does make the difference. They're not equal in terms of they're both headed to an AP program, and that's the end of it. An independent education plan substantially makes a difference.
But
that's all I wanted to say.
They're not, the programs that they're going to are not specified.
Understood.
The special education. We went through this last meeting.
Agreed and understood, but it's still a matter of choice. For the gifted or the exceptional, the IE program, in my opinion, it's all the difference in the world. And it goes, in fact, with the parents and the student finding and agreeing that that suits their needs.
Okay, that's fine. Trustee Quim?
Through you, Madam Chair, then, perhaps to address that last question, we could add a word, and I'll propose a motion after I mention it, that we be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board will provide transportation to identified gifted students with an IEP who are accepted to an advanced placement program. So the superintendents would, or whoever's in charge of the program, would still have to accept the gifted student based on their merit into the AP program, and then they would qualify for the transportation. And that might be an answer to the equity piece of the students who are applying from outside of the gifted program to AP. The students will be accepted based on the merit, and then those that are in the identified program can be provided the busing. So I will move to add the word accepted to an advanced placement program. So that therefore, having an IEP would not be a guarantee of an AP spot, but once accepted to an AP spot, then the busing would be available to them. In response to that, Madam Chair, but this answers the query about the equity for students not in an IEP who are interested in the AP program and will be applying to it, and they will have a fair chance against all students in the board. That is it. Thank you.
The motion is redundant because once a student is identified with any exceptionality, they legally have to have an IEP. So you don't need to state that. I could say other things about equity. I wonder about students whose IQs are 1 or 2% below the threshold for us. What if you're 96th percentile rather than 98th? Like, by virtue of 2%, you're not going to get transportation. I think it could be an equity issue as it relates to human rights.
So I wouldn't argue with any of that, but I think we have a conundrum on both sides. The human rights, so the rights of the IEP students who are identified and are part of codification in the ministry's language. So my amendment is geared to ensure that the student, although identified as an IEP, may not be the best candidate for an AP program, depending on the individual student. Perhaps they made no effort in grade 8 and don't qualify for the AP program. Based on merit, they'd be accepted by the superintendent or whoever decides.
May I respectfully ask of you, Madam Chair, that we get a seconder? And if we need to continue the discussion, we can do that. It's kind of moot if we don't get a seconder, but I appreciate your point.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure the amendment addresses the question that was raised about equity, and maybe I heard it wrong. I think the question was, if two students apply to a program, are we providing transportation for one student and not for the other? So if two students, whether they were designated with an IEP or not, both applied and were accepted, are we providing transportation for one as opposed to the other?
If I may say, and I hear you, Director, I think it's a reasonable comment. Currently, we would like to provide it to all students, but we've been told that the costs are just far too high, and we understand that. So that's why an incremental approach makes sense, to do what we can, when we can. And I do support this amendment that Trustee Quinn is, but I also hear Trustee Trites on what she's saying, that if you have an IEP, you should be let into this program. I think that if we can pass, you'd have a process to apply to this in either case. So I think it probably you're more likely to be put into this AP program if you already have an IEP. But I think it's good to have a process that they would go through like anybody else, and this still helps those individuals with IEPs, because they're more likely to have the opportunity to go to the program at the school with a busing option. So yeah, is it perfect? Do they automatically get in? No. Would be nice in a perfect world, but at least this is one step further to allow more students with an IEP into that program. That's just a thought.
Yeah, so respectfully, I think there's some confusion here. We would have many students on IEPs who are not gifted, who might want access to this program. I think the way you've written the amendment is going to leave us more open to other parents whose children are on IEPs challenging the same opportunity to access transportation. There could be students on IEPs simply for mental health issues, for anxiety, depression. So if you include the IEP piece, I think you're going to have more parents vying to have transportation provided for their children.
Through you, Madam Chair, and in response to Trustee Marai, I'm sorry I didn't make myself clear when I was talking about the IEP, I think we heard Superintendent Pernelli say many, many times, and I just took it as a given, or it's a you understood, that of course they have to apply. They have to apply. Sorry, I should have made it a little bit clearer because we all understood that. I would also mention to you, Wendy, that in the original motion, and I believe the words are picked up in the amendment, that we're talking about identified gifted students with an IEP. So I think that narrows it down a little bit more. Gifted students? Okay, thank you. I'd like to listen to that response.
Right. So as soon as you're identified with any exceptionality, you automatically have an IEP. It's the law. So the two go together. Once you're identified, you have an IEP. So it's redundant to say identified students with an IEP because as soon as you're identified, you must have an IEP.
Madam Chair, if I may ask again. I understand that, and it makes perfect sense, but would not the modifier of gifted, or if we have to add exceptional, would that not zero it in or narrow it down? Because this is identified gifted students. So
right. So you don't need to include the piece about IEP then. It would just be what you're back to your original motion, I guess is what I'm saying. Students identified as gifted. That's who you're privileging busing to. My question is, once you add the IEP, I'm wondering how other parents might perceive that, whose children may also have the ability to apply and be accepted by virtue of their ability, but who also have an IEP for some other reason.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. That is correct, Trustee Marai. And if the words with an individualized education plan is the hurdle here, I think we could also remove that. If identified gifted students is the appropriate term for senior staff to know about whom we are speaking, and for the public to understand about whom we are speaking, then I would propose to remove those four words as well.
Was your amendment that you put forth with the advanced placement? That was your amendment?
Yes, ma'am. It was accepted to an advanced placement, and if we removed with an individualized, I scratched it out already, education plan, IEP, that might solve our...
Okay, so read the whole thing again for me, please.
Be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board will provide transportation to identified gifted students accepted to an advanced placement program if one is not available in their catchment area, if requested.
So the only new word really is accepted. And we
removed the words with an identified...
Yes.
Individualized education plan.
Be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board will provide transportation to identified gifted students who are accepted to an advanced placement program if one is not available in their catchment area. Is that it?
That is it, thank you.
Okay. Who was your seconder on the original amendment? Trustee Carabella, so you're withdrawing that? Are you seconding in the second one? Okay.
Yes.
Any questions to what I just read? Apart from the fact we don't have the money for this, are there any questions? We may have human rights issues, but I guess we're going to have to deal with them. Trustee Quinn?
Just to the back row for a follow-up on those proposed changes. I'm
sorry? Yes, go ahead.
So does that answer your concern about the redundancy of the motion and how it may affect other students who are on an IEP?
It does address the redundancy. I think the motion is better written, if I could say that, but I do think there exist inequities now because we're privileging the busing to students with a particular IQ when we are then going to say no to students whose IQs are slightly less than that, or maybe quite a bit less, but they're equally able. If they were to apply and be accepted, we will not privilege busing for them. So the motion is well written. It's just, from my view, it's an inequity issue.
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. So that we're voting on the amendment only at this point, or the Right, and it's, the amendment is to strike out the words "with an individualized education plan," and replace those words with "who are accepted." Okay, yeah.
Madam Chair, I'd like, point of order, to call the vote. This has gone on quite long.
I don't want to leave.
Excuse me, Trustee Rowe, did you have something? Did I miss your hand? No, okay.
If I may, I just want to reiterate the concerns that Superintendent Nagoy mentioned regarding some of the unknowns around transportation funding. I think earlier this evening, staff was directed to survey parents of gifted students in terms of their ideas around programming. I think we might, with all due respect to our last two delegations from the last two board meetings who did present their opinions, we're kind of making a decision here for a number of other parents and students, and we really haven't had input from them yet. Well, we're directed, staff's been directed to develop a survey for parents of gifted students, I'm assuming around programming options, how they feel they're being accommodated currently. We may very well find out that the results of those surveys might lead us in another direction.
I think that the purpose of those questions wasn't around transportation. It was around the actual programming that they're involved in.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I think we need to recognize that with this particular motion, in some ways we're making the AP program a de facto gifted program, and therefore it is a program. And that's not currently our position, at least the senior staff position.
It's not a program specifically for the gifted, and it is not staffed by special education staff, teachers, so forth. All right, so any student who can pass that test and get into it is welcome to try. But then, are they going to get on a bus or not? And why not? Okay? So, that is it. We're going to go with this now, and do I need to read it again? No? All right, so we are at, is this an amendment now? I can't keep track of it. Okay, we're at the amendment. Okay, so Trustee Caravella?
In favor.
Thank you. Trustee Stephanie?
In favor.
Trustee Intermassi?
Opposed.
Trustee Michael?
Opposed.
Trustee Trites?
In favor.
Vice Chair Murray?
In favor.
Trustee Danko?
In favor?
Trustee Denzel?
In favor.
Trustee Rowe?
Opposed.
Trustee William?
In favor.
Trustee Quinn?
In favor.
5-4. Okay, then that passes. All right, now where am I? That was the amendments. Now I'm back to the main motion. All right. Any other comments on the main motions? I'm going to read the main motion. Stephanie?
Speaking from a student's perspective, could this policy possibly create more divides in the classroom, hurting the gifted students' classroom experience, since not all of the advanced placement kids will have access to this service? These new divides this creates should also be considered while voting on this motion.
Yes, that's possible. Trustee Intermassi?
Through you, Madam Chair, as you pointed out, I mean, or as the director pointed out, we're only talking about AP here. What happens if a student is gifted, wants to do IB?
This motion is for AP.
Well, exactly. So,
another meeting.
I'm in favor.
Opposed.
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 In favor?
In favor.
In favor.
Opposed.
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 In favor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move resolve the Halton Catholic District School Board accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee that Policy 2-11 daily teacher plans be approved as amended.
Seconder, please. Trustee Rowe.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor. In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Be it resolved, the Halton Catholic District School Board accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee that Policy 2-23 child care facilities be approved as amended.
Thank you. A seconder, please.
Madam Chair, I would boldly move that we move all items 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.7 all at once.
Second that motion, Madam Chair.
In the interest of... No, I'm not. In the interest of time, though, I'm not in a hurry, but I think maybe others are.
Thank you, Trustee Danko. Could we add 8.8 to it as well? I believe that was part of that. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't. Nope.
So we had significant discussion there.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. This report is linked to our strategic priority of meeting the needs of all learners, and the purpose of this report is to recommend the purchase of a core resource for Grade 7 and Grade 8 history and geography. The Nelson resources are presented in a blended print and digital format, which ensures content will be updated and enhanced throughout the life of the resource. The teacher and student resources are flexible since they come in blended print and digital formats, which allows for diversity in meeting the needs of all learners. Opportunities for differentiation are highlighted, and the resource also supports teachers and students as they continue to transition to an inquiry-based learning model. The Nelson Education Company representative will support the curriculum consultant and teachers to implement this resource in every elementary school. So in conclusion, this resource would support grade 7 and 8 teachers in addressing the required curriculum expectations for history and geography while recognizing the diverse learning needs of the students in our schools and ensure that they are delivered within the Catholic context. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Superintendent Buckhausen? Trustee Trice.
Just a little bit of information through you, Madam Chair. Page 86, under the comments, the resource also supports teachers and students as they continue to transition to an inquiry-based learning model. What was the previous learning model, please?
I'm trying to think. I'd like to believe that we've always had an inquiry-based learning model, but we're trying to actually bring our texts and all of our resources in line with that model, more or less. I think the inquiry-based is something that is more active for our students and gives them an opportunity to engage in the learning and be a participant rather just a recipient of information. So it's more group work.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hang on a second. Did somebody else have a question? Trustee Carabella, and then Trustee Danko.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
through you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, so this replaces Nelson History 6 and Nelson History 7? With
History 7 and 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so just wondering what happens to the old textbooks? Where do they go?
They're lovingly recycled.
Great. Okay. Where? Do you know?
Actually, I do not, but we do have a recycling process that involves textbooks and any print materials that we do follow through.
Somebody else, Trustee Danko and then Trustee William. Go ahead.
Chair Abenda, I'm pleased with that conclusion in the comments because our board meetings are really based on an inquiry-based learning model.
Is there any way that we can provide the opportunity for some of the students to have the old textbooks? I know when I was in elementary school, I loved to study ahead and look forward. Is there any way, opposed to just recycling them and wasting them, that we can provide students in younger grades or in the current grade the opportunity to actually bring the textbook home and study from it?
We used to use them for resources. We sent them to the third world. We've done all sorts of things over time. Superintendent Prakasam?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think we have done different things in the past, but I think the cost of shipping and handling to developing countries, and also the fact that some of the information in the grade 7 and 8 textbooks is outdated and incorrect, particularly anything related to Indigenous learning perspectives and history.
Point. Okay, thank you. Was there someone else? No? Okay. All right, so can I have a mover, please? Trustee Intimacy, seconded by Trustee Trites. Everyone's ready for the vote? Can I just have a show of hands? I think it should be pretty easy. Okay, thank you. Unanimous. Thank you very much, Superintendent Prakasam. 8.9, 2017-18 Draft Audited Financial Statements. Superintendent Ngoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to first introduce, in our audience, we have David Marks, our KPMG lead partner, sitting in the back, in case trustees have any questions with regards to the audit of the financial statements. And also, Aaron Lofts, our Senior Manager of Financial Services, will be walking trustees through a presentation to provide an understanding of our financial statements before trustees approve the 2017-18 audited financial statements. And in the back, we also have the Manager of Budget and Capital, Jay Chantavong, and our Manager of Accounting and Financial Reporting, Andrew Capling, who are the key players in putting this together and working on all the details that feed into the financial statements. And maybe I'll just mention that the financial statements also include the independent auditor's report, which have a clean audit opinion. And I'll pass it on to Aaron to walk you through the financial statements. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Presentation is similar to ones we've seen in the past. So I'm going to kind of go over kind of the things we've seen before and kind of maybe focus on things that are relevant to these statements. Just a quick synopsis of what the statement package entails. Now I notice that it's not lining up here, but that's okay. We have the standard reports, a statement of management's responsibility, the auditor's report. As Roxana mentioned, it's a clean opinion. We have the statement of financial position, aka the balance sheet, statement of operations, also known as the income statement, statement of changes in net debt, statement of changes in cash flow, and notes to financial statements. So as we mentioned, we're going to start with the financial position, or the financial position of the board. So this is basically what the board owns and what the board owns. We're going to be looking at page 94 of your package, which is again the audited financial statements of the board. And looking at this, we're going to see that our cash and cash equivalents are $38.7 million, which is large relative to past years. And the reason for this is we have about $31.9 million in short-term investments and about $3.5 million in school-generated funds. The $31.9, the majority of that is actually proceeds of disposition from a site sale this past year.
It's page number 97. I believe it changed since...
Oh, I'm sorry. It's page 4 of the audit report, page 97 of the package. So I kind of commingled the two there. Thank you, Roxanne. So we have the assets held for sale. This is a site that closed. This year we don't have any assets held for sale because that site that we did have in our previous statements closed this past year. So then we have the long-term receivable, $176.6 million. Well, what is that? Well, $160.7 of that is receivable from the ministry relating to past debt that we've had on basically constructions pre-90, or I'm trying to remember when we went away from the OFA around 2012 or so. Previously, we were funded for our capital projects. At the end of the project, we went out for debt, typically through the OFA or some other medium, and we would receive the money upon completion of the project. The new model is we receive the money essentially roughly 6 to 8 months after the expense has been incurred. So under the new model, we have about 15.9 of that 176.6 million in the new model, which we'll be receiving typically in the next 6 to 8 months. So we have our statement of temporary borrowing. It's 32.0 million right now, and what is that? Well, that's primarily our education development charges, and it's our timing. It's our shortfall due to timing on the purchase of our sites. So right now we have a deficit, basically what we paid for our land and what we've received for our land of $32 million. Statement of, our accounts payable, and our accrued liabilities. Well, 23.6 million is in, and this is primarily broken down by construction. Construction makes up a large part of this. We have 10.2 million in outstanding invoices, and we have 2.3 million in construction holdbacks. Another large part of this balance is our accrued wages, and that's about 5.7 million. Deferred revenue is 38.5 million, and as I mentioned before, a large part of this is our proceeds of disposition. And our proceeds of disposition is about 30.8 million of that 38.5 million. Employee benefits payable, that really hasn't changed much since last year, and this is based on actuarial studies. You can see there, that's the breakdown of how that $6 million is made up through a gratuity benefit, a post-retirement benefit, and workman compensation, and a small amount of compensated absences to top up sick days. Our net long-term, now we're going to look at our liabilities. So on page 97 as well, we have our net long-term liabilities. Well, what's our net long-term liabilities? As I mentioned before, remember we had 176.6 million receivable from the ministry for debt and capital projects? Well, this is essentially the liability to that, the offset to that 176.6 million. So 160.7 million is a is a debt that is supported by the ministry, meaning that we're going to get the funding back for that 160.7 million. 9.2 million, though, is unsupported, meaning that we as a board are responsible for paying back that 9.2 million. And that 9.2 million basically represents construction projects prior to 2010. Deferred capital contributions. We have tangible capital assets. I won't spend too much time on this. They've basically just gone up. The additions to our capital assets this past year was about $31.6 million. And as it says there, note 10 if you want to see the particulars of those adjustments and additions. So, the accumulated surplus. Where do we end up at the end of the year? So we've seen this statement before in past presentations, but just to kind of draw attention to the middle of it, where we have total accumulated surplus available for compliance. That's where we're going to start. So that number there, if you look in the middle, the in-year change of $3.77 million is basically funding that we have control over for this year as a result of our surplus. So how is that surplus broken down? Well, we have about $300,000 or so in non-designated surplus we've added to our balance. We've added $1 million to our operating revenues. $265,000 or so was added to our school budgets. That's our rollover of our school budgets. The Indigenous reserves, we've spent that this year, so that's actually decreased by $28 million or so. Committed projects reserve, a lot of that portion there is essentially commitments from our prior year, from 2017-18, that the invoice hasn't come through yet. So we used the budget from last year, we just haven't paid for it yet, so that's being rolled forward. Committed capital interest earned and committed capital projects, essentially that's a part of that 280,000 or so is making up a difference in our deferred capital contribution, and the $76,382 is the interest on that unsupported capital. Finally, we moved about $2 million or so into our facility capital reserve for future projects. So where do we end up? Well, you can see to the right of that, that's our ending balance. So we have about 25.1 million, so it says as of August 31st, 25.1 million in reserve that there's a form of control that we have as a board over. So our ending capital reserve is about $9.4 million. Our operating reserve is about $4.4 million, or 1.3% of our operating budget, and we have $830,000 or so as a non-designated surplus. The bottom section of that chart in front of us is items that we do not have control over as a board. So things like our revenues recognized for land, basically our land purchases, all the book value of our land over the past number of years. Our school-generated funds is about $3.5 million at the end of August. We added to that balance throughout the year about $144 million or so. And then the other items, pardon me? I'd say 140. Oh, yeah, big difference there. 144,000, not million, is what we moved over from school-generated funds throughout the year. And our employee future benefits and interest to be accrued. Interest to be accrued is on our long-term debt, and employee future benefits, we've talked about that earlier.
Just a point there. As we look at this, other than the operating reserve and the non-designated surplus, the rest of them have an intended purpose, so they are committed. Yes, internally committed, but they still have a plan, so there's an expense attached to them, or a past expense that they come into revenue to cover for the amortization of those past capital expenses. So we are looking at the operating reserve as being the one that we have more discretion on in terms of using towards balancing the budget as we move forward. So it's the 4.4. I know the $25 million sounds like a big balance. It really is looking at those two top numbers.
So I'm going to skip the next couple of slides, as they're just the same ones we just went over, just with a little different information or kind of summarizing it. So I want to move forward to the statement of operations. So that's on page, I'm not sure what it is of the package, it's page 16 of the slides. It's referencing page 98 of the Halton Catholic District School Board's year-end financial statements. So what is our statement of operations? It's essentially the income statement. So what we're going to look at is we're going to compare what our revenue was currently, what we ended up with, to what our original budget was. So you can see that our revenue has gone up about $13.3 million relative to the original budget. Now, what is that made up of? Well, a large part of that is due to an increase in enrollment. We have $6.2 million in grant revenue. The 5.1 revenue is a big increase for the other provincial revenues. So what is this? Why did this go up so much? Well, a large part of this was revenue is EPOs, Education Program Other, but there was a remedy that was paid out as a result of 2012-13 and 2013-14 labor agreements. So that was a remedy that was the ministry gave us the money for that remedy, and we in turn flow that money through to the employees that are eligible. Finally, the last number, the $1.9 million, we're going to talk about this in the next slide on the expense, but this $1.9 million in increase in deferred capital contribution, what basically that is the demolition of St. Joseph's. So there was a deferred capital contribution related to St. Joseph's. We've demolished that structure. That's the revenue coming in to offset the difference in amortization versus the amortization. So quickly looking at the change over the prior year, it's similar to what we just went over. It's 22.6, a little higher obviously. But again, a large part of that is due to enrollment, $19.2 million in enrollment. You might also see the 4.3 decrease in other revenue. Well, a large part of that is a decrease in EDC's revenue due to what we've collected relative to the previous year. $15.5 million is we're now looking at the expenses. Again, this is page 98 of the package. $15.5 million, we have $15.5 million more in expenses relative to the original budget. Again, this relates to increased enrollment. It's going to increase the expenditures. We also have the section that in the other area, the EWECTA and the QP remedies relating to 12 and 13, the one that we talked about before on the revenue side, this is the expense side going out to cover it. We also have the increase in pupil accommodation. A large part of that is due to portable leases, and again, increasing enrollment. as well as the loss on the demolition of St. Joseph, of which it's covered as revenue. So really there's no loss per se as far as the net impact to the board. $28.8 million. This compares to, this is the increase in expenditures over the prior year. A large part was instruction, 18.2. Pupil accommodation, as we talked about before, increased 5.5, but again, because of portables, amortization, leases, things like that, and demolition costs. And again, the other increase because of the elected and the QP remedy settlement based on the 12-13, 13-14, as we've previously discussed. So where does this end us with? As we talked about earlier, it ends us with a surplus of $10.4 million. Now, we've kind of already gone over that on the financial position slide, but I just want to draw attention to the last or second last slide here or so. And it basically is a continuity. So it shows us what our prior year cumulative surplus was of about $118.6 million. Our current year surplus of 10.4 gives us almost $129 million. And then, as we talked about in the previous slides, that's our in-year adjustments to the various buckets of projects, I guess. So we have our non-designated of almost $830 million. Working funds ends up, or as we have allocated, working funds in total is $4.4 million. Capital capacity planning, school budgets. These are all items we talked about in the previous slide. Nothing's really changed from it, just a different way of presenting the information. That concludes the presentation. Any questions relative to it? Or?
Thank you very much to Roxana, Aaron, Jay, and your colleagues for all the work that you do. Are there any questions? No? Okay, excellent. No? This is a surprise. Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate all your work. We'll move on to information items. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. Thank you. Vice Chair Murray, seconded by Trustee Quinn. All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay. Moving to information reports. 10.1, Student Trustee Update. Trustee Stephanie?
Okay, so on November 13th, we had our See the Problem, Be the Solution launch, which is an anti-bullying campaign board-wide. This happened at Holy Trinity in the morning. A few student leaders from each elementary school attended. The day was opened up by a talk from Superintendent Pinelli about what the initiative means to her. Student trustees presented about what the initiative is about. Our student senators facilitated sessions discussing how to end bullying that were specific to their school community. And so our Senate meeting, so we just had our last Senate meeting at John Vanier on December 13th as well. This meeting was focused on discussing new initiatives that we want to see in the coming year. And the Senate voted on which initiative we want to put forward, which Senate will dedicate the rest of our year working towards putting on. So we decided on Indigenous Culture Day. So it's going to be one day board-wide. It's to raise awareness of Indigenous culture in Canada, and there's more details to come. So we need to get it approved by our teacher facilitators and talk about it more with where it's going to be, when it's going to be, stuff like that. But that's the general idea about that, and all the student trustees from each school voted on that initiative. The last thing is the student trustees were invited to a lobby day at Queen's Park to lobby for Catholic education with other students, staff, and organizational members on November 27th. We will be advocating for Catholic education with MPs, Cardinal Collins, and many other prominent Catholic figures. So we're really excited for that, and that's all.
Sounds very exciting. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Do your colleagues have anything to add? Gentlemen? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Trustee Carabelli, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to know, because I think we have the Indigenous Month as well at Halton Catholic. So how does the Indigenous Cultural Day add to that?
If I'm not mistaken, is that this month? The Indigenous Awareness Month? Yeah. So I think it's just like another thing to raise awareness kind of as a separate kind of initiative. Just with the students. It's probably going to be one day, just maybe having some ceremonies that relate to Indigenous culture, because a lot of students don't know a lot about the culture, and it's something that is part of our Canadian heritage and that we should really explore more. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you to the student trustees. Excellent work. Thank you very much. 10.2, school educational field trips, Superintendent Ballo.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, the approved school educational trips is available for your review, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on school trips? No? Okay. Thank you. 10.3, construction reports for St. Scholastica Catholic Elementary School, Superintendent Merrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, presenting the construction report for St. Scholastica for October. As you can see from the pictures, the gym is now open, and we're just wrapping up the finishing trades in the library and a little bit in the atrium as well. So hopefully over the next few weeks, everything there is complete and the school is fully operational. I'd be happy to take any questions that trustees may have.
Any questions? No? All right. Thank you very much for all your work. It's looking great. 10.4, construction report, St. Mark Catholic Elementary School, Superintendent Merrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, presenting the construction update for St. Mark's building addition for October. As you can see from the pictures, the roof deck is now on. The membrane for the roofing is going on this week. Windows are all installed, and we're working on the inside now, so mechanical, electrical, and getting ready for the finishing trades. I'd be happy to take any questions that trustees may have.
Thank you. Any questions on St. Mark's? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. 10.5, extensive trip advisory committee, ETAC trip proposals. The Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The ETAC committee met on Wednesday, October 11th to review the following requests. All 5 of the requests come from Thomas Merton and they regard international or North American trips that are attached to credit-bearing courses. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, if any.
Questions, trustees? No? All right, thank you very much. Moving on to 10.6, the 2017-2018 Treasurer's Annual Investment Report. Superintendent Nagoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Attached is the annual investment report as required under Regulation 4110. When a board makes investments during a fiscal period, the Treasurer is required to report to the board on the performance and the eligibility of those investments. We have been fortunate this past year to have carried a cash flow balance of over $30 million, and we have made fiscally responsible investments, term deposits with our financial institution, TD, through the year, and have gained about $81,000 in interest revenue for this year, with most of these maturing into the next fiscal year, and expected to earn $520,000 in interest. These are as a result of the proceeds of disposition balance, as a result of the site sale, and are going to complement that balance and be reinvested in our schools as school renewal. As I mentioned before, in terms of eligibility, the term deposits are one of the safest ways to commit funds, and that are guaranteed in terms of principal and interest, and we do not take risks with the board funds. So we have made sure that we did shop around for the best rates that we have for a term deposit and stayed with Schedule I financial institutions. I think I should also mention that the ministry has changed their cash management strategy going forward, where they now include the proceeds of disposition balance into what they consider the calculation on the deferred grant payment to a board. When we submitted the budget for 18-19, we had mentioned that the deferred payment, grant payment, would be about $106,000, so immaterial for our budget of over $400 million. However, by including now this balance, even after we take away the expected school renewal projects that will be funded by proceeds of disposition, we are going to have a deferred grant payment between September and March of this current year of $6.9 million, and between March and August another $3 million. So that will put quite a bit of a challenge on our cash flow and will hinder our ability to invest in the future. I'll bring another annual investment report at the next year around this time. However, whether or not we would be able to make these commitments in the future is unknown, and that has been the case in the past. As far as I've been with the board, we haven't had an annual treasurer's report because we did not have a significant balance of funds in our account to consider investing.
Any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to 10.7, the 2018 Audit Committee Annual Report to the Board of Ministry. Superintendent Nagore.
Yes, Madam Chair, just a moment. So this is the annual report to the Board of Trustees with regards to the performance of the internal auditors and their work performed during the year, and presented to the Audit Committee, and it will be forwarded to the Ministry of Education as required. And as with prior years, I'd be happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Any questions on the report? None? Nope. Okay. Moving along, 10.8, Audit Committee Report to the Board of Trustees.
This report outlines the topics that were discussed at the last Audit Committee meeting on November 15, and most of them were already addressed throughout the agenda of this meeting. So I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions on the audit report? No. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your work and that of your department. 11.1, we're into minutes now. Minutes of the September 17th SEAC meeting. 11.2, minutes of the September 27th Audit Committee meeting. 11.3, minutes of the October 1st CPIC meeting. 11.4, minutes of the October 9th Policy Committee meeting. 11.5, minutes of the October 11th Special Policy Committee meeting. 11.6, minutes of the October 30th Special Policy Committee meeting. No correspondence, and please note that the board package is ready to go out to trustees on a Friday. So if there's correspondence, we need to have it by then, as trustees need to be able to read it and assess it and respond as appropriate. So that's just something to remember with correspondence. 13, we have no questions. Rosie, from the no questions. We do not need to go in camera. 15, we have no absentees. 16, farewell remarks. Okay. Yes.
May I just ask your leave to ask a question of the Director of Education about our current policy 2-39 in reference to the accusations at St. Michael's College School in Toronto. That's our progressive discipline policy. And in my reading of it, it doesn't seem that there is a requirement on behalf of the principal to contact the police in cases of violence. So I wanted to flag that to the current director and to the incoming board that policy 2-39 may have to be updated in light of that current situation at St. Michael's College.
We'll have to look into that. Thank you. All right. So basically, we are now at the farewell remarks. So we'll go around the room, and if anybody wants to say anything, you're most welcome to do so. Make a few brief remarks. So, Trustee Carabella, you're not going anywhere, but do you want to say anything?
I do have something prepared. I would like to thank all the outgoing trustees for 4 years of working together to make Halton Catholic District School Board the best school board in providing and promoting academic excellence and Catholic faith formation. This being my first term, I've learned a lot from all of you. I really wish you heartfelt success in your next endeavors, where you share your talents with the communities that you are all in. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to working with the incoming trustees for the next term. Thank you.
On behalf of all the students of Burlington, I would like to thank the 3 Burlington trustees especially and the entire board for your dedication, contribution, and passion to this board and community. You truly enforce the board's motto of achieving, believing, and belonging in our schools, and although you are not recognized as much as you should be, your work does not go unnoticed. You have positively impacted the lives of many students, and we see your work reflected every day in our school communities. May God bless you in all of your future endeavors. Thank you.
Oh, here we go, 11 years of talking. But I think what it really comes down to is gratefulness. I'm grateful for having the opportunity to serve, the journey it's provided, and the countless immeasurable relationships I've attained. I think through God's good grace, this role has been the opportunity of a lifetime. I believe our board is blessed with outstanding teaching staff who continually rise time and time again, despite the obstacles, to maintain our outstanding provincial record of delivering quality education on a daily basis. My thanks to all senior staff of my tenure, along with my trustee colleagues, and all the clergy for making this trip an enduring one. I will miss the wonderful relationships I've enjoyed and support of so many who buoyed me through some of our most challenging decisions. I am most proud of our student trustees who demonstrate the future is in good hands. They are walking examples of our Catholic system through their faith and sense of social justice as community leaders. I wish the new Board of Trustees well in their new role as they make decisions for the whole of this board and the families and students they serve. You hold the fragile gift of Catholic education in your hands, and may this be the center of your collective decision-making. Thank you for stepping up to serve. Thank you to everyone, each and every one. I've learned something from everyone. I wish you every success, and may God bless.
Thank you. I'm very happy to say that I've been a trustee and a chair and sat around this board table with all of you. I've met amazing people that I hope that I will stay in touch with for a very long time. I have made innumerable new relationships. Who knows where they'll go? It's never been dull. It's always been tumultuous. And I think that we're leaving the board a little bit better than the way we found it, and I hope that the incoming board can do the same again, maybe by leaps and bounds. I think the work around this table still needs to remain in the best interest of the students always, because the parents are sending us the best they've got. I'm confident that the school board is very well positioned for the future in the hands of Mr. Daly and the new trustees, senior staff. The board will always be a part of me. Thank you all.
I just want to say the last 4 years have been amazing in so many ways, and I agree with my fellow trustees. It's been such an honor and a privilege to meet and know everybody. Thank you.
I'm grateful for the people of Oakville who put the trust in a 21-year-old back in 2010. More than any other, I would like to thank ratepayers, because the fine work is done by the HCDSC would not occur without the great funding, the resources that they provide us. Kudos to my trustee colleagues. I'm confident that we left nothing on the table, from fighting for anti-bullying initiatives literally on day one to vastly increasing the transparency of the board with the recording of board and committee meetings, from transitioning the board from deficit budgets to consistent balance and surplus budgets. We took on many issues, no matter how difficult, and that's something to be proud of. Thank you, Diane and Jane, for your leadership as chair, for our capable student trustees, true leaders themselves, and thank you to the senior staff for your wisdom, and to all of our wonderful teachers and staff who give so much each day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Abenda. I think all elected people serve at the pleasure of the voters. So it was certainly my pleasure to serve the Catholic ratepayers of Oakville for the past 12 years. I thank them for giving me this opportunity to debate important issues at the table that many school boards do not do. Thank you.
Coming from the students of Milton as well as Halton Hills, we would also like to give a great thanks to you, Diane and Mark, as well as to the rest of the trustees sitting at this board table for your distinguished guidance, service, and leadership in being the passionate voices that have been given to our school board and this community. We would like to leave you, all the trustees and all the incoming trustees, with a simple quote. Your smile is your logo. Your personality is your business card, but how you leave others feeling after an experience with you becomes your trademark. And you all clearly have left the students with a unique trademark. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank the electors of Halton Hills for their support, which has been continuous throughout my 8 years. The staff and students of Halton Hills, and particularly the excellent principals I had to work with. And at the beginning, the guidance and support I received, particularly from Father David Winan and Father Bob Bolbrook. I'd like to thank the staff that I've dealt with and worked with, and the trustees that I've worked with, for all their support and their willingness to do the best that they can for the students of our board. And I'd like to thank my wife. Thank you.
Well, I definitely can't top the I think my wife part, but I'll continue with what I can actually say. On behalf of myself and the Oakville students, I'd like to thank all the Oakville trustees and all the trustees from across our board for your dedication and influence within the Halton Catholic District School Board over the past 4 years. Very few students know who you are or acknowledge your actions and time commitment, though I cannot thank you all enough for your work and the learning you've bestowed upon me over the last few months. Even though I've only sat alongside you for a very short time, I can't think of any situation which I've learned more about our board and education as a whole, and I thank you very much for that. As your terms come to an end and many of you will not be returning, may God guide you in all your endeavors, and I wish you all the best.
As I look back on the 8 years, I first of all have to thank the Catholic ratepayers of Milton for placing me in this position as trustee. It's a tremendous honor to be trustee for any community. I know as a board we've had so many good days, and there have been times when we haven't quite agreed with each other, but we've loved each other through it, so we carry on. I do believe that we stayed true to our mission. We came to the table representing different regions of Halton and offering different perspectives on a variety of issues. And while we didn't always see eye to eye on every issue, each one of us had the best interests of our students at mind. Tonight our term comes to an end. I'd like to thank our fellow trustees for helping me grow in my role and as a person, and together we've accomplished a great deal. I'd especially like to thank the directors, past and present, and senior staff of the board who keep us going, keep us together, and give us the input and all the information and knowledge that we need. I would also like to extend our collective good wishes to the incoming Board of Trustees. May you continue to defend and protect the interests of our students and further the mission of Catholic education in Halton. It's been an honor and a tremendous source of pride for me to serve on this board for the past 8 years, 4 of these years being chair. I wish you all the very best and continued success in the years ahead. To the students, the parents, and staff that make up this vibrant Catholic school community, may God continue to bless you.
Certainly. Please join me in our closing prayer in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, thank you that you have revealed your love to us today. We invite you to send us out from here in the power of the Holy Spirit. Fan into flame the gifts that you have given us. Come, reveal your grace and truth to us each day, for yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Thank you very much, Mark. A safe trip home to everyone. Thank you very much to those who have joined us, especially thank you to the trustees coming in.